Okay, so now that we have kind of talked about, oh, this is being weird. Oh, okay. Now that we've talked about the different types of goals, we just want to talk about how you set them correctly, how you go about, setting the right goals to get you on the right track. Okay, so when you're setting goals, the how to do that is using the acronym SMART. Um, and I know that many of you are probably familiar with this method, but it's always really good to. I keep looking at the screen instead of looking at the. It's always really good to review. So we're going to start with the SMART acronym. The S is specific. You absolutely want your goals to be specific. If they're too vague, they're not motivating. They're not that exciting, and they're quite honestly not that achievable. You won't know, the specific performance measures and what processes to focus on if your outcomes aren't specific. And you want them to specify exact behaviors that you need to exhibit, exact circumstances you would like to be in, and by when. So the by when part bridges right into the M, which is measurable. This is really important. Being able to measure yourself and evaluate yourself is the only way that you can honestly and realistically be able to say you're making progress or not. It's really, really, really important that as athletes, especially as college athletes, that we can evaluate our performance in some way, shape, or form. And this is really, really hard to do. It's hard to self-evaluate, and it's hard to take evaluations from coaches too, because it is subjective, and it's really hard not to involve kind of your emotions and just other distractions or excuses even inside your evaluation process, which is why it's best to quantify things. And some goals are very quantifiable and some are not. So, if I'm a track runner and I run the mile, I'm going to have to be able to hit certain splits, like every 200 it's a certain split, it's a certain time. That's very quantifiable. Or you're going to need to be, in a certain spot in the pack in order to know that you're going to compete that race. Or you're going to set yourself at a particular place in the pack to start the race, because the people you're racing against, you're aware of the route, you're aware of the conditions, and you're aware of what you're going to need to do in order to kind of get first. But then there are goals that are not quantifiable at all. So, an example of that as a soccer player is marking on defense. I was not good at this when I played soccer. Because really I just wanted the ball and I wanted to score, and I didn't really care where the person that I was responsible for or the space that I was responsible for was sometimes, which isn't super smart, but we won't get into soccer strategy right now. The whole point is I always just used to have a coach that was like, find your mark. Where's your mark? And I'm like, I don't know where my mark is. I want to go score. This was really hard for me. I would lose track of that, and therefore sometimes my team would get penetrated down the middle. I played in the middle of the field because I wasn't on my mark. But the coaching that I got was a little bit too sort of, where is she? My coach would always yell at me, and I'm like, it didn't work well. So now when I coach, and I'm coaching players that are a lot like I used to be, I like to say, okay, every restart, so every throw in, every goal kick, every corner kick, whatever it is, find your mark and shout out her number. So that's what you need to do. It's measurable, right? So how much, how many. I don't know. It works. It's a little bit more specific. And there's a checkpoint on the restart. So it doesn't matter how many restarts there are. Every time there is one, you have a job. It's going to re-engage you. And it's going to get you to, be a better defender, or at least raise your awareness around defending. The next sort of letters are the A, and I love that Robin Veely has the double A, aggressive and achievable goals. I don't think that people make their goals hard enough. I think that unless unless a goal is challenging and difficult, I don't think they're as motivating, and I think sometimes that's the reason people don't stick with them, and or they have a false sense of how good at something they really are, because everything they go out and try to do, they know they're going to be able to do it. And for me, that's just a false sense of confidence. It doesn't make you better. Yet, if they're too aggressive and they're absolutely not achievable, you're constantly setting yourself up to fail. So there is sort of that fine line between aggressive and achievable. And I think that, the best goals are difficult, challenging, aggressive, but they have to be able to motivate and inspire you. And they're achievable when you're at your peak performance. And this is kind of where sometimes people get caught up in the fear of failure. When something isn't necessarily achievable, you start to, let me back up. I think that as soon as when you're thinking about how aggressive your goal should be, I think as soon as you start to get a little scared, when you're thinking about a certain time or a percentage or any game or performance measure that you want to hit, as soon as it starts to get to that point where you're like, ooh, can I do that? I don't know. Maybe I could do that. I don't know, though. I don't know. It seems a little too hard because I'm only right here, right now. I'm in this present state. Could I get that far? That's exactly when you know you're shooting for the right thing. As soon as you start to get a little bit scared, as soon as there's that small sense of fear and that voice of self-doubt comes in, that's your goal. Like, that's what you have to go and get. So, that's just my thought. The R is for relevant. So this one is really important. I think that it has to be individualized to you. It has to be personally meaningful. I think if you're on a team, it should be relevant to what the team is striving for as well, which can be hard for some people, but in the end, it's a team sport. You want your team to win. It's obvious to me, but sometimes that can be hard for some people, individuals. Really relevant to practice and competition. So something that you actually are doing in practice and competition, your goal should relate to actions and things you're going to be doing. If I'm a quarterback, I'm not going to set goals on running routes and catching balls. I think it's not relevant. I, as a soccer player, or when I was playing, I wasn't going to make my goals relevant to, my friend Jenna, who played for the U.S. women's national team and went on to play at North Carolina. I'm not going to set my goals because I want to be like her to her personal standards. I still have to make my goals relevant to me, and this is where you have to get really realistic about where you are now, what you're able to do, your ability level, and you really have to be able to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself. And they should be relevant both physically and mentally to you specifically. And then the last one, the T, is time bound. So this just helps athletes focus on performance and process rather than get too far out tied to the outcome. The deadlines kind of keep you on track. I don't think it's realistic for your outcome goal to be, in a week. I want to achieve an outcome goal. I think lots of times outcome goals, because they're so long term, there absolutely has to be some time-bound, shorter-term performance and process goals that you can sort of constantly evaluate yourself on. I like to say that the time-bound aspect of something just holds you accountable more frequently. I think that if you put a deadline on something, the urgency stays high, but also it holds you accountable to actually doing it. So in the book Mind Gym, he talks a lot about procrastination in one of the chapters, and he says that, those who procrastinate don't do anything, and by not doing anything, they can't fail. And so procrastination becomes sort of this self-defeating cycle. And sometimes when people are just goal setting in general, if they don't have smart goals, they just have these like lofty goals out here, they can procrastinate all they want. They can have all of the ups and downs they want because there's no accountability factor. There's no relevance. It's not specific. It kind of gives the person the option to slack off, get distracted, make excuses, etc. I really like the example of, or I think one example in the mindset chapters that we read last week was that young violinist who she was this child prodigy, and she didn't have any goals. She got to Juilliard and she thought that she was the best already. And as soon as her instructors sort of challenged her to change the way that she held her bow because she wasn't going to continue to improve, she got really scared. She procrastinated. She put stuff off. And she just sort of shut down because she was afraid to set a standard that she may not be able to achieve. And she therefore wasn't focused on anything. There wasn't anything holding her accountable to getting better. She was very bought into just sort of this idea of being a prodigy instead of just trying to get better for the sake of getting better. Because I think without goals, it's really easy to make excuses, and it's really easy to shut down and give up and go back and give up and go back. And I think that one of the scariest things for athletes in the world is to buy into this idea of progress, hard work, and preparation and give it everything you have and not succeed. To have to go out there and have goals and have, performance standards and have an outcome out there that you want to get, it's a big risk because the outcome's uncontrollable. And you're giving it everything you have through a goal-setting process, and you still don't get to where you want to go, or you still fall short over and over and over again, even after, your 10,000 hours, whatever it is, or a life circumstance comes in the way and you can no longer maybe do what you need to do in order to get towards your outcome. That's scary. That's hard. That's, I don't even like thinking about it, because as an athlete, I don't want to think about how I maybe couldn't get to something. And that's when a lot of people shut down. So again, the importance of goals, setting goals, but most importantly is the right way and the how to set them in a way that kind of keeps you on track, keeps you motivated, and honestly keeps you challenged and realistic and honest with yourself about where you're at and where you need, in terms of where you need to be. Whew, I am running on little sleep. So, next section. Okay.